what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, another physique update from Derek Lunsford, this time in the form of a posing video at slightly under 5.5 weeks out from the 2025 Pittsburgh Pro. So Derek appears to be extremely confident in how he's looking for this prep. If you guys remember the Arnold Classic prep, we really didn't see a whole lot from Derek in terms of physique updates, especially as we got down to the final 6 weeks or so. That's when he really started to taper off the physique updates, but we're getting this video today. Yesterday, he posted the back lat spread shot comparing his Arnold Classic prep to this prep and looking a lot sharper at this point in this prep than he was at 6 weeks out from the Arnold. And I get that same impression from this posing video, the impression that he's very confident in how he's looking, and also the impression that he's probably looking better all around than he was at 6 weeks out from the Arnold, which is interesting. I was watching an episode of the Cutler Cast the other day, and Jay said something to the effect of, because Jay has worked with the same coach that Derek is working with, Krizo, and Jay had said something to the effect of, well, he knows that Chris, takes like a slower approach to things, and in like the last couple of weeks really ramps things up, whether it's cardio or diet. So, in relation to Derek looking at 6 weeks out, maybe not as sharp as everybody else, it's because those last few weeks are a lot more intense, which I thought was an interesting perspective coming from Jay. I never considered it like that. And I think that was some of the conversation going into the Arnold that strengthened the idea that Samson was going to win at 6 weeks out, 7 weeks out, whatever, because some of the updates that we were seeing from Derek didn't really look as sharp as I think a lot of people expected him to look, detail-wise, conditioning-wise. And I think that maybe that explanation on the Cutler Cast could be the reason for that. But this time around, especially now that we have the context of that comparison picture Derek posted yesterday, this posing video here, we have Derek's last show being the Arnold Classic where he beat the reigning Mr. Olympia. So with all that context in mind, Derek seems to be the most impressive guy going into Pittsburgh, which is saying a lot considering how impressive that lineup is. I mean, the updates from Martin, the guest posings from Martin, he looks impressive. The updates from Nick, he looks impressive as well. Good Vito, we've seen some updates. We're going to find out exactly how impressive he looks this weekend. All those guys look great, but of all of them, in full context, I think Derek looks the most impressive. On paper, he's the most impressive. He looks better than the Arnold, where he beat the most impressive bodybuilder in the world, Samson Dauda. Or I guess I should rephrase that. He doesn't look better than he did at the Arnold, but he looks better in this prep than he did at his Arnold prep. And we saw the package that he brought to the Arnold, arguably one of his best. So it seems like we could be not only on track for a Derek Lunsford victory in Pittsburgh, but we might also be on track to see potentially the best version of Derek we've ever seen. And I think the other important question that's going to be answered here is, can Derek repeat that same formula effectively that he implemented at the Arnold again and have it be successful for him? Because I think a lot of people think maybe, because there's a lot of people that think he shouldn't have beat Samson. And a lot of people think maybe it was a fluke and maybe he can't replicate, maybe Derek can't replicate that look again. So I think that's the important thing that we're going to find out here is, working with Krizo for the first time going into the Arnold, there's a lot of speculation on how Derek was going to do with this being his first show not working with Hani Rambod. So if him and Chris are able to replicate that look or even better in Pittsburgh, I think that exponentially strengthens the argument that Derek could win the Olympia again this year. And I think it also strengthens the argument that Derek might actually be the favorite going into the Olympia. And then even extrapolating beyond that, if Derek for some reason decides to do the New York Pro a week after Pittsburgh, and he's able to replicate that look again, and he's able to peak 3 times and have this new improved package 3 times, and proves that he can do this formula over and over and over again, I think that really changes the tide in his favor going into the Olympia this year. And if he does that, if he does all 3 of those shows, I think the only real wild card left is Hadi Chupin. the only guy that he will not face at any point before the Olympia, and the only guy from the Olympia to next Olympia that we don't know if he can beat. And I mean, yeah, Derek has beaten Hadi at the Olympia before. Obviously, Derek won the Olympia. But I mean, from last Olympia 2024 to 2025, Hadi Chupin will be the only guy that beat Derek, that Derek didn't have the opportunity to face in that time between Olympias. So he's kind of going to be the only real wild card against Derek, because Derek is about to show us what it looks like him going up against every top Olympian before the show. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Derek Lunsford is creating quite the conversation in 2025 so far. What do you think about these physique updates? What do you think about his chances in Pittsburgh? Do you think there is a real possibility that he does the New York Pro? And then beyond that, what do you think his chances are at the Olympia? Do you think he can reclaim that title this year? Now, next up in the news, again, speaking of the Pittsburgh Pro, another guy that's doing that show that we haven't talked about as much as the others would be Michael Krizo. And some of the updates that Krizo has been posting lately look almost unbelievable. He posted this update of his quads on his Instagram story today. Then he had posted this other update of his arm on his Instagram story in the last 24 hours. And I feel like there's kind of an aura around Krizo that maybe people's expectations from him are a little bit low. Expectations for him, rather, are a little bit low, considering the fact that we haven't seen him compete in a while. And he had this shoulder injury, shoulder surgery, and I feel like people aren't expecting him to be back to 100%. I feel like people maybe aren't expecting him to be like a big factor at this show. But, man, I'm looking at some of these updates where he's showing that arm that was worked on, and it's almost unbelievable that it looks almost better than it did before. Which, I mean, maybe like he said, if this was an injury that had been bothering him for years and maybe inhibiting his training and holding him back, maybe he is better than he was before, since the surgery seems to have gone so smoothly. The recovery seems to have gone great. But Krizo looks ridiculous. And he is doing the Pittsburgh show. So I've talked a lot about Good Vito, Nick Walker, Derek Lunsford, Martin Fitzwater, and we've talked a lot about Bonac recently with the fact that he did the Detroit Pro and won the Detroit Pro, got his Olympia qualification. Krizo is here. He's got the same Olympia record as William Bonac. His last Olympia, he was also 7th place. Could he be a wild card factor in Pittsburgh that we're not considering enough as a factor here? And I saw him put up a story today, actually, where he was kind of doing a Q&A session on Instagram, and he was answering questions, and one of the questions was like, essentially the translation was, because it wasn't in English, but the question was something like, how do you feel doing Pittsburgh against these guys that, you know, your chances of beating are rather slim? They're the best bodybuilders in the world. And I liked Krizo's response. He said, if you want to be the best, you have to compare yourself with the best. And I liked that answer a lot. Now, next up in the news, one of the fan favorites from this past weekend's Detroit Pro, Sauce Heirati, the guy with the crazy condition that was second to William Bonac in Detroit. A lot of people felt that was a controversial decision. A lot of people felt that Sauce should have won that show. Well, Sauce confirmed on his Instagram story today that he is going to be going to do the FIBO show in Germany, the show that we just talked about with Sergio Oliva Jr. He just confirmed that show as well. And that is why I genuinely love this time of year with bodybuilding. Now that the season is back into full swing, and I've said this a few times before, it feels like Christmas. I mean, we're getting a show almost every weekend with like diverse different lineups in different countries, back to back to back. I mean, look at this IFBB schedule here of the next just 2 or 3 months. So this weekend, we just had Detroit last weekend. We've got South America this coming weekend. The FIBO is next weekend, April 11th and 12th, and that's in Germany. Then after that, you've got the Emerald Cup, which is just Masters, but then you've got the Pittsburgh Pro, May 10th, the New York Pro the next week, May 17th, the Cali Pro the next week, May 24th. You've also got this Korean Natural show that same weekend as the Cali. Then the next week in May, the 31st, you've got the Legion Sports Fest. And then that first week of June, you've got the Toronto Pro, and then you've got the M Pro Classic the next weekend of June, the Dubai Pro the next weekend, the Flex Pro in Italy the next weekend, the Mr. Big the next weekend. It is literally week after week after week, just bangers of shows. And this is the time of year that I love. We are going to be constantly entertained every weekend for the next several months, and that's not even counting, the Olympia, which is not till October. So this is going to be an absolutely jam-packed spring/summer full of bodybuilding shows. I mean, I don't even remember a May/June. So that's 8 weeks straight of an open bodybuilding show. Yeah, literally 8 weeks straight of an open bodybuilding show every single weekend, and then even going into July, but just May and June, 8 weeks straight, an open pro show every single weekend, some weekends 2 pro shows. And I think May is probably the month that changed the most because Legion is typically later in the year. Now they're in May, and the Pittsburgh Pro never had open bodybuilding before. Now they're also in May. So I think this might be one of the first times, at least in recent memory, that we've had all of May and all of June booked every single weekend. There's a pro show. They're not even like just little shows. They're bangers of a show. I mean, the Dubai Pro in June, Legion Sports Festival is always a good show. New York Pro, Pittsburgh Pro. I mean, these are good shows. The M Pro Classic is usually one of those shows that has a really good international lineup, like a European lineup. But anyway, I digress. I'm just excited that we get to watch a bodybuilding show every single week for the next 8 weeks. It's going to be fun. Let me know in the comments below, actually, which show you're most excited for this summer. Not the Olympia coming up in October, but which one of these qualifiers are you most excited for this summer? Now, next up in the news, I also wanted to include another physique update from Sergio Oliva Jr. Since we just mentioned the FIBO Pro and we just mentioned Heirati, and we now know 2 names, 2 pretty good names that are doing that show, both Sauce and Sergio. I think Sauce really impressed a lot of people, including myself, at that Detroit Pro. But Sergio, in his latest updates, have been really impressing me as well because we haven't seen Sergio in a while. In these updates, I think he looks really good. And I think it does recontextualize a lot of the updates that we've seen from Sergio now that we know. I mean, these updates are essentially less than 2 weeks out that we're looking at right here. So, of course, he's going to look really good. But even some of the updates that we saw over the last couple of weeks, I don't think we really knew because Sergio hadn't announced yet that those updates, he was 3 weeks out. He was 4 weeks out. So he was really close to competing. He just hadn't announced it yet. And I think that's why he was looking so good in these last several weeks. And actually, now that I think about it, I think FIBO might be a new addition this year too. I think they had stopped doing the pro show for a couple years at least. I don't think they did the FIBO Pro for Open last year. So that's another one added to the mix. And I'm kind of wondering which European bodybuilders we're going to see jump in that show since it is over there. And we haven't had yet this year a European Olympia qualifier yet because the season just started. So the FIBO show will essentially be the first European opportunity of 2025 to qualify for the Olympia. So I have a feeling we might actually see a really solid turnout for that show with it being the first qualifier in Europe this year. And like I said, the next one wouldn't even be until halfway through June, which would be the M Pro Classic. So they're a little bit more few and far between. They're a little bit more sporadic with the European shows. So I feel like we might actually see a pretty decent lineup at this FIBO show, even though, I haven't heard that much about it, similar to the Arnold Classic South America. I just have a feeling the FIBO might turn out to be a really entertaining lineup. I mean, we already have 2 guys that I'm excited to see with Sauce and Sergio. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Now, next up in the news, shout out to the Instagram account, Who is the Best BB, who is the best bodybuilder on Instagram. I saw them post this, and this actually led me to message Patrick Tour myself just to verify, because I hadn't seen either Patrick or Carlos Thomas Jr. comment on this publicly yet, but I did see this post on this Instagram account. So I messaged Patrick and asked him about it just to verify that it was true, and Patrick verified exactly what they said in this caption. So apparently, Patrick Tour, he was coaching Carlos Thomas Jr. into the Arnold. He's also known for coaching Logan Franklin into the Arnold. And look at the package Logan brought. He's also known for coaching Keone Pearson. He used to coach Ian Valliere. And shout out to Patrick Tour, by the way, because he messaged me back super quickly, and I really appreciated that, like lightning fast. But yeah, he verified this. So apparently going into Detroit, he coached himself. Carlos coached himself. And that would explain, I had commented on this before, that in between the Arnold and Detroit, we saw not a single physique update from Carlos Thomas Jr. or from his coach Patrick Tour. And at least now we know the reason why Patrick wasn't posting any is because Patrick wasn't his coach. And maybe the reason Carlos wasn't posting any is maybe because he wasn't as confident in how he was looking in between shows, not having a coach. So I don't necessarily know what to think when it comes to Carlos in terms of, is it a coaching thing? Is it a Carlos thing? Or is it maybe a health issue thing that's preventing him from getting in shape? Obviously, Patrick Tour has a track record of getting people in crazy shape. Look at Keone at the last two Olympias. And then especially the most recent example, I would say, look at Logan Franklin at the Arnold Classic. I mean, Tyler Mannion literally said after the Arnold, he can't remember the last time he saw a physique as conditioned as Logan was at the Arnold. So we know that Patrick can get guys in shape. But we also know that with Carlos, he's had this, I believe it's colitis. He's had this gastrointestinal issue. Again, I believe it's colitis. I'm not a doctor. I don't know every gastrointestinal issue disorder name, but I believe it was colitis, and that was something he struggled with for a while, and maybe that could be a contributing factor for why he can't get in shape. I've seen people suggest that maybe he's just doesn't want to diet. Maybe he's just one of those guys. I kind of doubt that it's that. Carlos clearly has some degree of a high work ethic. I mean, you look at his physique, and yes, his genetics are insane. Crazy genetics on Carlos Thomas Jr. But to get legs like that, it's not just genetics. That's busting your ass to get legs like that. So I think Carlos does have a good work ethic. So I kind of don't believe that he would just refuse to stick to his diet or refuse to get in shape. I mean, it's possible, but a physique like Carlos has isn't built on just genetics alone. So I believe he is a hard worker. Just whether or not that applies to the diet, I guess, is up for debate. But I did think this was an interesting story because it kind of feels like Carlos's future is in limbo a little bit. He's been with Patrick Tour for a while, and, based on these past two performances in Detroit and at the Arnold Classic, it seems kind of up in the air what the rest of the year is going to look like for Carlos, because at this rate, I have a hard time envisioning Carlos getting to the Olympia, winning a show, this year at least. And especially after this departure from his coach, which, to be clear, Patrick didn't give me a reason why. He didn't say who left who or what happened. He just confirmed that it did happen. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What does the future hold for Carlos Thomas Jr. as it pertains to the rest of 2025? Now that brings me to the next story, another client of Patrick Tour's. Keone Pearson posting another kind of industry-shaking physique update today, where again is drawing a lot of conversation and parallels to what if Keone does open bodybuilding. And at this point, I mean, I've glazed Keone so much over the past couple years. I don't really know what else to say about these updates from Keone that's different from what I've said before about these off-season Keone updates. So I guess what I would say about this update, obviously, I think he looks very impressive. Obviously, you guys know I think he would do well in open bodybuilding. I think he would actually do very well in open bodybuilding. As far as structure, genetics, the front double bicep, I think he's got some of the best in the game of all three of those. So rather than just continuing to glaze Keone in this segment about his latest physique update, I would just leave you guys with the question of if Keone did the 2025 Mr. Olympia. I know he's doing the 212 Olympia in 2025, but just for hypothetical sake, if Keone did compete this year, because we have an idea of some of the guys that are going to be at the Olympia this year, 2026 I think is too far out to say how do you think Keone would do in 2026. But just for speculation's sake, my question for you guys is, if Keone did this year's Mr. Olympia 2025, where do you think he would place at this year's Mr. Olympia? Do you think he'd be top 5? Do you think he'd be top 3? Do you think he could win? Just let me know in the comments down below. And the final story that I've got for you guys today, and I kind of feel the same way about this guy as I feel about the Keone story. Terrence Ruffin posting 2 more physique updates today, which he says are from 6 weeks out from the Pittsburgh Pro, which will be his big return to the classic physique stage. And I say I kind of feel the same way about Terrence as I do about Keone, is because I feel like every time I've talked about one of these new Terrence updates, I end up just talking about how great I think he looks, which is true. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I wanted to share this update with you guys because I think Terrence does look really impressive. I'm personally very excited to see his return to the classic physique stage in Pittsburgh. I'm personally very excited to see his return, hopefully, to the Olympia stage, assuming that he wins one of these shows that he does this year and qualifies. And I think this is going to be a very successful comeback for him. And as we see more and more updates from Terrence, I'm just more and more impressed. And I think that's all that there really is for me to say about it. But that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did, in fact, enjoy it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.